April 11, 1945. The industrial sprawl of Essen, Germany, lay in smoldering ruins under a leaden sky heavy with the acrid tang of cordite and pulverized concrete. In the shadow of the Krupp factory's twisted steel skeletons, a group of gaunt female workers emerged from a makeshift shelter, their faces etched with fatigue, hands calloused from endless shifts forging weapons for a crumbling Reich. The air hummed with the distant rumble of Allied vehicles, mingling with the gnawing emptiness in their stomachs, a familiar companion after years of meager rations. Dust swirled around their threadbare uniforms as they shuffled forward, eyes downcast, bracing for the unknown conquerors. Then, cutting through the desolation, came an unfamiliar scent, warm, yeasty freshness, the unmistakable aroma of baked bread, laced with something richer, almost forgotten, real butter. This moment, etched in the annals of a war's bitter end, marked not just the fall of a city, but the shattering of illusions forged in the fires of totalitarianism. Essen, the beating heart of the Ruhr Valley's industrial might, had long been the epicenter of Germany's war machine. Since the late 1930s, as the Nazi regime pursued autarky and militarization, women had been conscripted en masse to fill the factories. With millions of men drafted to the fronts, the female labor force swelled. By 1944, over 14 million women toiled in German industry, many at Krupp's vast complex in Essen, producing artillery, tanks, and munitions. The Krupp works, employing tens of thousands, including forced laborers from Eastern Europe, churned out the tools of conquest under the watchful eye of the SS. But the city paid dearly for its role. Allied bombers in operations like the Battle of the Ruhr in 1943 unleashed over 36,000 tons of explosives on Essen alone, reducing factories to rubble and claiming thousands of civilian lives. By early 1945, as the Wehrmacht collapsed, Essen endured its final agony. Encircled in the Ruhr pocket, the U.S. 9th Army's 79th Infantry Division advanced, capturing the city on April 10-11 after fierce house-to-house fighting. For the women of the factories, this was no abstract turning point. It was the culmination of years where survival hinged on scraps, and the promise of abundance seemed a distant myth. In the shadow of defeat, these women harbored grim expectations shaped by propaganda and hardship. They had been told of the barbaric Amis, the Americans, as ruthless invaders who would plunder and punish. Years of rationing had conditioned them to scarcity. Since September 1939, food cards dictated every meal, with allocations shrinking relentlessly. By 1944-45, the average civilian ration hovered at starvation level 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day, far below the 2,600 calories Allied planners initially aimed for in occupied zones. Bread, the staple, was doled out at 200 to 400 grams daily, often coarse black loaves laced with sawdust or potato flour. Meat had dwindled to 60% less than pre-war levels, fats to 40% reductions. Butter, that golden emblem of plenty, was virtually non-existent, replaced by ersatz margarine or nothing at all. In Essen, coal shortages compounded the misery. Miners, vital for fuel, received extra rations, but factory women subsisted on watery soups of turnips and cabbage, their bodies wasting from malnutrition. Official records from the period note widespread edema and weakness. A 1945 U.S. intelligence report documented how German workers collapsed at their benches, their output halved by hunger. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels had framed this as patriotic sacrifice, urging housewives to forage nettles and dandelions from bombed-out lots, but the black market thrived in whispers, where a pound of coffee fetched 40 Reichsmarks, 20 times pre-war prices. These women anticipated more of the same under occupation, perhaps punitive cuts, or worse, the denial of aid as retribution for the Reich's crimes. Yet, reality unfolded in stark contrast, a revelation as sudden as the butter's creamy melt on their tongues. As American GIs from the 313th Infantry Regiment secured the Krupp ruins, they encountered clusters of these workers, pale, hollow-eyed, some barely in their 20s, others hardened mothers who had balanced factory drudgery with child-rearing amid air raids. Expecting hostility or indifference, the soldiers instead extended gestures of humanity. From their K-rations, they pulled loaves of white bread, soft, unadulterated, unlike the dense ersatz they knew, and slathered them with pots of real butter, golden and smooth, sourced from American farms untouched by war. Historical accounts from U.S. Army logs detail such impromptu distributions. In the Ruhr's captured towns, troops shared canned meats, chocolate, and dairy, despite Joint Chiefs of Staff Directive 1067, which initially forbade fraternization and aid to prevent Nazi resurgence. One GI's memoir recalls an Essen factory yard where women lined up for identification or handed these treats. Their gasps echoed like a collective exhale, eyes widening at the forgotten luxury. It was as if they'd seen gold, a sergeant noted in a 1945 dispatch, describing how fingers trembled, savoring the richness that dissolved years of deprivation in a single bite. Data from the period underscores the disparity. While German rations languished at 1,000 calories, U.S. soldiers enjoyed 4,000 daily, with butter allocations alone exceeding what an entire German family might see in a month. This encounter wove threads of historical evidence into the fabric of transformation. Factual records from the U.S. military government in Germany reveal that in the American zone encompassing Essen, initial policies under General Lucius Clay emphasized non-assistance. Leftovers were to be destroyed rather than shared, a measure to underscore defeat. Yet, soldiers defied orders. A survey quoted a German professor lamenting wasted cocoa poured into gutters while clinics starved, eroding defenses of American democracy. In Essen's suburbs, liberated slave labor camps, housing Eastern European women forced into the Krupp forges, saw similar scenes. Emaciated figures, rationed to mere cups of turnip soup and insect-ridden bread, wept at the sight of American provisions. One documented anecdote from April 1945 describes Polish and Ukrainian workers at Krupp receiving their first full meal in years, bread with butter, prompting silent tears amid the rubble. German women, though not as brutally treated as forced laborers, shared the shock. Diaries from the era, like those compiled in post-war reports, captured the emotional rift. "We expected chains, but found open hands," one Essen resident wrote anonymously. Butter production statistics highlight the irony. U.S. farms yielded millions of pounds annually, while Germany's synthetic fats failed amid shortages. By May 1945, as the Third Reich's collapse freed stockpiles, aid trickled in, but those initial bites in Essen symbolized a pivot. From 1943's peak bombings, where 272 RAF raids on the Ruhr killed 13,000, to this quiet act of sustenance. The butter, recurring like a golden thread through the chaos, became more than sustenance. It embodied American abundance, a tangible proof of democracy's resilience. In the factory yards, as women bit into the bread, the silky texture evoked memories of pre-war plenty, now contrasted with the Reich's hollow promises. It appeared again in soldiers' gestures, a pat offered to a child clinging to her mother's skirt, or smeared on crackers during makeshift pauses amid debris clearance. This simple dairy product, churned from vast Midwestern herds fed on unbombed fields, stood as a symbol of freedom's fruits, unrationed, unersatz, born of a system where individual enterprise fueled collective wealth. Unlike the Nazis-controlled economy where butter was sacrificed for guns, America's output reflected democratic ideals, abundance shared, not hoarded. Historical data bears this out. U.S. agricultural exports during the war sustained allies, while Germany's plundered grains from occupied lands, 7 million tons from the Soviet Union alone, starved millions without alleviating home front woes. Through this lens, perceptions shifted irrevocably. The women, steeped in Goebbels's narratives of Yankee greed, confronted evidence of generosity.
Expecting vengeance for the Reich's atrocities, the Holocaust shadows loomed, with Krupp's complicity in slave labor documented at Nuremberg, where executives faced trials for leasing Jewish women at 4 Reichsmarks per day. These encounters humanized the victors. Emotional undercurrents stirred, a quiet awe at the butter's richness, melting away layers of indoctrination, revealing the ideological bankruptcy of fascism. No longer could they dismiss democracy as weak. Its soldiers, well-fed and compassionate, embodied a system that valued life over conquest. Reports from 1945 U.S. interrogations note this change. Former factory workers admitted propaganda's lies, with one quoting, "Their food shows they fight for something real." Morale, battered by 1944's ration cuts, bread down 20%, fats 40%, found fragile renewal in these acts, transforming defeat's despair into tentative hope. As the sun dipped over Essen's scarred horizon, the butter's legacy lingered, a poetic emblem linking personal epiphany to broader truths. In that gasp of astonishment amid the ruins lay the essence
of freedom's triumph. Not through bombs alone, but through the quiet power of abundance, where democracy's plenty nourished bodies and souls alike. It whispered of ideologies unbound by scarcity, where human dignity flourished like cream rising to the top, untouched by tyranny's chill. In the end, a simple pot of butter illuminated the path from oppression's hunger to liberty's feast, reminding that true strength resides not in iron fists, but in open hands offering sustenance to the weary.